This is the Real Estate Investing 365 podcast, your go-to source for real estate investing strategies so you can start living the life you want and get where you want to go. With your host, Justin Hanna.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Another episode of Real Estate Investing 365. Today I got with me Colin Douthit. Hopefully I said that name right. Hopefully I didn't mess it up, but he is the owner of Atlas Property Management, Atlas Construction. He's based out of Kansas City, Missouri side, I believe, kind of a suburb, Blue Springs. And so Colin, what's up, man? Thanks for being here.
No, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here, and it's nice to get FaceTime with somebody during COVID.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's funny. My wife's, as we were recording this, I don't know, when is this? This is April 30th. My wife's out of town. She's like got sick of being home with the kids, you know, and just doing school all day, and their gym is closed. So she decided to drive to Southern California. It's probably illegal if anybody's listening to this, but and go stay with her sister who lives by the beach. And so she's been gone for like a week, and I work alone. I come home alone. I go to the gym alone. I'm like, all right, we got a Zoom interview so I can talk to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand where you're coming from on that one.
It's kind of funny. So yeah, Colin, you're in the Kansas City, Missouri area. Why don't you kind of dive into where you came from before real estate, how you got started in real estate, and then we'll dive into your businesses and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I guess going back to college, right? Went to an engineering school here in Missouri called Missouri University of Science and Technology. Played football down there. Got 2 engineering degrees from there. Graduated, started the work world. Got my master's in engineering management, construction project management route for GCs and subcontractors for about 7 years. Read a book and was like, hey, I'm going to buy some real estate. Yeah. And read a lot of books, actually, but the Rich Dad Poor Dad was kind of like the intro gateway drug to that. I was under contract to buy my first property, and then I got fired. And I was like, you know what? Let's just, we got enough runway saved up. Let's give this real estate thing a try. And that was over 3 years ago.
Okay. So that was just in 2016 or 17?
17, yeah.
Okay. And it's funny. So you just got started in 2017, really, with the real estate investing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that stopped real estate investing by that time because they thought, oh, the market's overheated. There's no good deals out there. And then look what happened. You just got started at that time and you bought tons of properties and started a real estate management company. And now you're got a whole new life going on that other people didn't even continue their real estate career because they're afraid that the market was overheated. So good job. That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's I mean, I feel like I've still been riding it up. I feel like I missed so much of the wave. I mean, things are weird right now. I think it's just temporary, but you know, there's still good deals out there to be found.
Yeah. Okay. So you got 2 engineering degrees. And so at what point did you kind of realize, is it just because you got fired that you're like, man, I'm just going to give this real estate thing a try? Or did you kind of have some writing on the wall that, man, this engineering life or working this corporate job or whatever it is isn't quite for me?
I always kind of had the entrepreneurial itch, right? So made a couple runs at some side gigs as well. That I had kind of rolling, and was like, okay, I want to do something. The corporate world wasn't for me. I didn't really deal well with the whole boss thing, and really just, it was the structure that I wasn't able to be flexible and have some autonomy over what I was doing. That was part just really, really got to me. And my last job, I had a really bad micromanaging boss. It was just all over me, and we were ISO certified and just oodles of paperwork that middle management was shoving down our throat. And I was like, this is just a form of torture.
Yeah.
it was so brutal. I was like, I've got to be done with this. And I'd even told a friend, I was like, in the next 6 months, I'm either going to quit or get fired. And then, 2.5, 3 months later, I got fired. So my prediction was correct.
Yeah, no, that's good. See, it takes the pressure off of you to have to like quit your job, and like, you're like, well, boat's already burnt without me doing it. So
yeah, exactly. And it was a huge sense of relief. Actually, like when I was driving home after that, I called my wife and I was like, I feel like this weight's off my shoulders.
Oh, cool.
My boss it was like panic attacks every time he would call, or anxiety. It was bad. I just didn't want to pick up the phone.
I hate that. Yeah, I get that sometimes too. My boss is pretty cool now, but sometimes you have to have meetings with like the uppers or people above him, directors, and you're just like, oh, you don't want to answer their dumb questions and
don't want to take that call. Exactly.
Take the political route of every answer. It's like, Um, so you said you're under contract on your first property, and then
Mhm.
at the time that you end up getting fired. So what happened with that deal? Did you end up closing on it, or?
Yeah, I still ended up closing on it. I was able to ride those last couple of paychecks for pretty long, pretty long way there for a bit. Yeah, so we ended up closing on it. I still own it as a 7-unit apartment building.
Okay, so
Mhm.
let's dive into that a little bit. 7 unit apartment building. Most people kind of get started in real estate with, a single family or maybe a
Mhm.
duplex or something. Was it because you read like Rich Dad Poor Dad and probably apartment investing books that you're like, well, I'm just going to go right to a small apartment building, or why did you pick that property?
Oh, I was really up for anything at that point. I'd been analyzing a fair amount of properties. I knew I kind of wanted to be in more of the multifamily just to start. I do own a fair amount of single family homes as well. That one just kind of came across. I live in a small town outside of Kansas City, about
Uh-huh.
5,500 people, and I've invested pretty heavily in that town because there's a large demand.
Yeah.
And this one was on the street and on the main drag through town. It said for sale by owner. And I was like, cool, let me call. So I called him and was able to get 5 years of owner financing and just put it together.
Okay. So that's awesome, especially since you hadn't done a deal before. So,
Yeah.
you know, what's some, I don't know if what you call it, advice or something that people seem to be so scared to like make that phone call. They see a owner for
Mm.
sale by owner sign, and like then you get into it. You're talking to the owner. Okay, you want to sell it. Like, how did you know to ask for owner financing, or how did it even come about?
I knew owner financing was a great deal. I knew with my employment status, that it was, that I think going to the bank would have been hard. Kind
Yeah.
of, we were finishing those kind of final details right as I got let go, and so I was like, well, let me just ask, and I put 20% down, and he was game for it. I think he was tired of it and wanted to get out, and he's a great guy. I let him. He held the note for 18 months and then 24 months. And then I did a cash out refi and got my initial equity back out.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. So there was no like early termination or anything. He just said
No.
up to 5 years, and
Yeah, I had a 5-year balloon with a 20-year amortization.
okay,
Mhm.
perfect. So, was the property? What kind of condition was the property in when you bought it?
Of the 7 units, 3 or 4 were occupied.
Okay,
So
and the other.
there's a couple of vacancies. And so I went in, and at that point I didn't have anybody that worked for me. So I was painting, I was doing light fixtures, plumbing fixtures, etc. I did have a sub come in and lay LVT or laminate. I can't do that. I'm not a
Yeah.
craftsman. So we did that, and then just started getting it leased up, and was able to pull much higher rents than what he had it at, and we've transitioned the whole building to new tenants at much higher rents now.
Okay, so it was in pretty good shape. It just happened to be vacant, and he was
Yeah.
an older landlord that probably
Mhm.
just didn't care about it that much and
Yeah,
wasn't.
he was just using he was using those vacant units to store personal stuff.
Oh, okay.
He owned it free and clear.
Yeah.
So he didn't, he'd owned it for a long time. He didn't really care too much at this point.
Right.
He's
Okay.
like, "Oh,
So
cool. Well, I can cash out and I'm going to make a lot more than what I paid for it."
I know it's like the perfect scenario, right?
Mhm.
Something that has, you buy it on a probably a super high, relatively high cap rate, and then
Yeah.
end up raising the rents way up and get to take a bunch of money out. So I normally ask like how you found it, but I think you mentioned that you knew the area really well. It was in your hometown or where you lived at the time, and it was on the main drag and said for sale by owner. So
Yeah.
how long had it been for sale for before you kind of called them?
Not that long.
Not that long, huh?
I mean, we drove up and down that street every day.
Right.
Right. There's kind of one main drag through town. And so less than a week before I
Okay.
finally decided to pull the trigger on it.
Okay, good. And then so you called them and ended up you probably started to get bank financing, but because your job, you said that you ended up doing owner financing. Now, did you
Mhm.
have inspections done and everything, or what kind of happened? Did anything happen with the property that, looking back, you might not have that you would have done differently, or kind of would have made the deal better?
No, I negotiated $5,000 back cash at closing to help finance some of the updates to the property.
Okay.
But no, I wouldn't have done anything differently. I think it's probably the best deal that I could have gotten, honestly.
Sweet. And then you ended up just managing it yourself and finding the
Yeah.
tenants yourself and everything, and which
Yep.
I guess was kind of what led to you then starting your property management company. So what was kind of the next steps? Like, so you get fired from the job, you buy this property, you're like, okay, I'm going to go out and do this real estate investing thing by my own, on my own.
Mhm.
What was it exactly that you did next? Did you start your property management company or buy more properties or
We
what?
started buying more properties. So over the course of the next 24 months, we acquired quite a few doors through partners, through local banks that would finance, even though we didn't have, a W-2 to lean back on, right? I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, here's my asset list. And then I was able to start using my asset. And even with that first one, it's like, okay, here's an asset list. And then I bought a couple smaller things, and okay, well then, my loan to value, my equity positions looked good. Then I was like looking at some cash flow with those properties, and then local banks that wouldn't even pull a credit report. I mean, small town banks, and you go meet with the president of the bank, and they'll give you a note. So,
Okay.
and then getting into some hard money on some opportunities as well. But yeah, so we started acquiring that, and then I got up to about 60 doors under management, or ownership or partnership in some way, shape, or form. And as I started growing, like, well, at about 40 or 50 doors, I need something to help manage
Hmm.
these properties. And so I started doing some research. I signed up for property management software just to manage my own portfolio. And then as that grew, early last year, second quarter last year, I started looking at potentially buying a property management company. That an introduction got made to me for somebody who was interested in selling. We made it to the NOI stage, negotiated all the terms, and he decided to back out of the deal,
Oh,
which was real hard. And then that was my genesis. I was like, well, I've been wanting to start a property management company. That just delayed me for a couple months while I went down that route. So then we started our own management company, and now we're at about 320 doors under management.
okay. Well, I mean, it is a bummer once you get to that stage, but I'm sure you learned stuff along the way. You probably like was able to dive into his books and like see a
Mhm.
lot of his operating, how he did it. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
which is
Absolutely.
beneficial, obviously,
Mhm.
to you. You can start your own because then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I know
Yeah. I
what
kind
this
of
is.
got to see behind the curtain a little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't have a mentor in this industry, right? So what I tell all the investors, like, listen, I managed just my own properties for 2 years before I touched a third party management.
Yeah.
So I made a lot of mistakes on my own properties that I'm not going to make on yours.
Yeah. That's
And I'm
true.
an investor, so I can understand where you're coming from and understand your pain points and what your goals are.
Yeah, for sure. So
Mhm.
in that first 2 years, you said you got up to like 60 something or 70
Mhm.
doors. Is that kind of
Mhm. Yeah.
was? So were those all your own properties or did you partner with people? You mentioned
Yeah,
raising.
I had so we took down a package of 17 doors. Then we had a number of partners on that one, and then I had another partner, and we acquired him and I together acquired 21 or 22 doors together.
Okay. So I kind of want to dig into right away after the 7 unit, you didn't have a job and you decided to go out and buy more property. So
Mhm.
you obviously had some cash saved. Did you have some cash saved up?
Uh, my father had passed away about a year and a half before that, and had a small chunk from his life insurance that was my seed money, essentially.
Okay. And then,
Mhm.
so how did you go out and identify the banks? Because you weren't in the real estate industry before. I know it was a small town and all, but did you just get a list of banks in your local area and then start going over there and saying, hey, I want to buy this
Well,
property? And
in a town of 5,000, you know all the banks pretty
right.
quickly. I did have somebody that was mentoring me a little bit,
Mhm.
and he owns a couple mobile home parks, and so I started buying a couple vacant mobile homes in his parks, and he was the one that kind of made the introduction to our local bank. It's a small town bank, and he's like, okay, well, this is who I use, and so we met and sat down with the president of the bank, and he's like, you know, this is Colin. He's good at real estate. He's smart, and that just kind of started that relationship off, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. No,
I
that makes.
wish I wish there was some sophisticated way that I could tell you that I did some analysis and everything like that. It was just really just networking, and then making acquaintances is kind of how it all happened.
Yeah, no, I mean that's kind of that comes up on every episode is like networking, how key networking is. It's talking to more people, meeting more people. But what I've done in the past is I would just make a list of like 20 or 30 banks, like smaller banks, not like huge multi-state banks or whatever. And then I would just go down the list and start calling them. And then,
Yeah.
if they wanted to meet, I could meet with them or whatever. And I've heard people putting together, a nice portfolio, a little package of
Mhm.
papers, like look professional when you go in there, show them your story and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
there's definitely different things you can do. If it's a small town like you, then hey, to go meet somebody that has used the bank before, and then that usually, I guess, would do it for you. So
Yeah, absolutely. Or, come with a good referral. We've put together some binders, and now we're still investing in Odessa, which is the town that I live in.
mhm.
But now our office is in Blue Springs, which is a suburb of Kansas City, and we're working with bigger banks now in Kansas City as well. But again, even with those bigger banks, we got networked referrals
Mhm.
from from agents, from brokers that are like, hey, oh, you're under contract on this property. Here's 3 or 4 guys that would be a good fit for you. And then our last one, which was a small syndication that we completed earlier this year, February, I believe, we used a bank out of Kansas City that was
Okay,
us. So
perfect.
same situation, essentially, through a referral, but it's now a bigger bank, or they can give us a little bit better terms.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Let me put this little. You see the sun? Sorry, everybody listening. I got this window in front of me, and the sun's coming through here, and like
It's getting you right in the eyes, isn't
getting me. Yeah,
it?
I should know this. I record freaking 3 podcasts a week, so it like happens every time, and I just forget to do it. But
hmm
that's okay. So, anyways, you end up getting up to like 70 doors and starting your own company. So you
hmm
mentioned that you had bought some management software
hmm
to manage your own property. So, was the goal always? You might have mentioned this, but always to start your own management company, or why did you not just go hire somebody else to run your properties for you?
Well, at the time when I was managing, 30 or 40 doors as we were growing, it didn't make sense for me. I was still, even on those partnerships, I was still pulling off a management fee, an asset management fee, if you want to call it that. Smaller than what my property management company charges, but since I had ownership in it, it didn't seem like a big deal to me. So, you know, I didn't I didn't think about it. I mean, that was money that I was going to be giving up, and this was going to be my full-time thing. So for me, it made sense just to stay in it full time and
Right.
be in the properties every day. The intention was never to start a property management company. That just kind of developed as I grew. I was having a bunch of maintenance calls, so I brought on a maintenance guy. It was a friend of mine. He was out of work, and he had been let go. And I said, "Well, why don't you come over here?" And he's like, "Well, I can paint a couple houses inside or do some stuff." And I was like, "Good. Well, we've got a ton of backlog, so go ahead and get started." And now he's my maintenance coordinator. And I was like, "Well, if I transition him, this was still when I was managing my own stuff, and I'll just let him field the calls, right? Or I'll at least give them to him."
Hmm.
And so then that kind of developed into that. And I was like, well, if I could start my own management company and I could at least have enough properties under management that I could afford one property manager that could manage other people's, and those pay for her, and she's managing my own properties, that'll take a lot of work off my plate.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, let's not do that. Let's grow these goals a little bit, especially once I started digging into the books of another property management company. It's like, oh, this can be, financially a good decision, and let's just see where it goes. And it's taken off. It's crazy, actually.
That's awesome. It's like such a good feeling, like to
hmm
build it like that. You know what I mean? Like you're doing it out of necessity, one step at a time, and all of a sudden, before you know it, it's like, well, I pretty much have a company now. So let's just
Yeah,
make
I
it
mean,
more.
so middle of last summer, we were at about 70 doors, 80 doors under management, and as we went official and went live and got everything done with the state, and now we're at 320 less than a year later.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And there's we've got a pipeline board that we keep, and there's another 30 plus units on the pipeline before June. And then we've got another investor that's looking at another 25. So like, oh wow, we might be 400 by the end of the year.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Before we dive into the management company, how were you finding all these other properties that you would end up buying? Was it again just networking, or were they all off market, some on market? You said you bought
hmm
portfolios and things like that. How did you find most of them?
uh One portfolio, again, thinking some of the small town stuff, was listed on Facebook. Somebody tagged me in a link, and they're like, hey, check this out. And it was 17 homes. One of them, another agent brought me that was a portfolio that was listed for sale. And then I, working with a couple different agents, I had a couple other single families that they're like, hey, check this one out. And, they ended up being opportunities for us. A duplex that a buddy of mine wanted to unload, and it was a good price. So we took that.
Yeah. Okay. So this dang thing, the sun is getting me still. There you go. How's that? See my dining room over there.
That's great.
um, Okay, so again, it just comes down to all mostly networking and everything.
Hmm.
That people were bringing you the deals because you obviously were talking to people and people
Hmm.
knew in the area that you were in real estate.
Yeah, and I never tried to talk myself up, right? I feel like we get emails or contacts from investors on bigger pockets or through our website or whatever, like, hey, I'm an investor, and you can tell it's very generic template that they just copy and paste
Yeah.
right to everybody, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the personalized networking, the introductions, and you have to start there somewhere.
Mm,
But once you can get past that stage, having those contacts. Right now, it's a little hard to get that FaceTime, but once the world's back to normal, getting that FaceTime with people, building those personal relationships, trying to bring value to those other people so they bring it back to you. At the end of the day, the way you bring value to a realtor is you close on deals that they bring you,
yeah.
right? You're not going to close on every single one of them because not every single one of them is going to be good. But if you perform on one every 4 months or 6 months, they're going to know that you are worth continuing to give leads to.
Yeah.
But if you just have them running around chasing stuff for 4 months, 6 months, and you don't perform, they're just going to write you off.
Well, and yeah, that totally, and be responsive. I know
Mm-hmm.
so many people that they get emails from their agents or whatever, and then they just don't respond back to them. I'm like, well, just respond back and say thanks for sending them a deal, and look over it and say this is why it meets my criteria, or this is why it
Yeah,
doesn't meet my criteria. Just like have that conversation, and at least they know you're looking at a deal and you are serious or whatever.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
that makes sense. Any tips for talking to commercial brokers? Have you worked with commercial brokers?
Yeah, we've worked with some bigger ones here in Kansas City. Um, if you're going to be wanting to close a big deal,
Uh-huh.
depends on how big. If it's your first big deal, you need to have something to back you up, right? I know some commercial brokers like, yeah, well, I know this guy says he's going to perform, but he's got one other thing in his portfolio. Where's he getting the money from?
Yeah.
They're a little apprehensive, right? So if you want to go syndicate or take down a $2 or $3 million project, well, show that you closed 750,000, $1 million project previously.
Hmm.
And maybe all the other gurus will tell you something different, right? And they'll say, just go out and start putting your name out there. But to me, you've got to have a little bit of a track record to build on, right?
Yeah.
So we did our first syndication, and we didn't try to go out and do a $3 million syndication. We did a $810,000 syndication on 18 units,
Okay.
right? And we were
Yeah.
able to get it done, but
Mhm.
now we've got that under our belt.
Okay. So was that an apartment building or just the multiple single families?
No, this one was recently. This one was in 2020. It was multiple buildings, three fourplexes and a sixplex.
Okay. So this is just like literally within the last month or two.
Yeah, that was the one we closed in February.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Right on. Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. I think that's why these mentorship programs kind of had taken off so much, is because for one, there's so many people getting into like bigger apartment buildings that have never done
Hmm.
any real estate before. But so it's like, well, how did you go buy this 200 unit complex? Well, it's because they partner with all these other people in the mentorship, and they can kind of um, put themselves together and then make a viable option. So
Yeah,
that makes
absolutely.
sense. Okay, cool. So you ended up starting your property management company. Tell me a little bit. I know we touched on that a little bit, but how did you be able to grow it so quickly within such a short amount of time? Like, how did you go from 70 doors all of a sudden you got going to be having 400 within this year, probably?
Networking. I mean,
Again,
if I
yeah,
give advice to anybody, be network, network, network.
yeah.
Be somebody that somebody else wants to talk to. Bring value to other people.
Hmm.
So we've got a couple of good partners here and we've performed, right? We performed initially. We performed on the first one or two test runs,
Hmm.
and we got positive reviews. And from us performing, we've been able to build the reputation. And then, some of them we have repeat customers. Some of them is we work with some big commercial brokers that we've got good relationships with. And, we get the opportunity to be brought in with new investors, right? And so some of those commercial brokers, though, they want to do big stuff. They don't have time for small stuff. However, we were offering, and this is probably where we were bringing value to them. We were offering a service essentially. We were analyzing properties. We were on smaller investors, right? If these bigger commercial brokers only want to do stuff that's 750, 500,000, $1 million and up, whatever the number can be, we were saying, hey, send us anybody that reaches out to you that wants to buy single families or duplexes or fourplex. And I was working with different agents, different realtors to have a pipeline of those deals come in. So we were analyzing them, sending them out, and then letting these guys close on the smaller properties, but then bringing in the other broker to help do the transaction, right? So he gave us the lead. We were doing all this legwork, building our property management company, giving them the close on the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And he was getting his 3% on it. And so he was happy with that. And so he kept feeding us deals. We performed on some of those single families and the fourplexes. And then it was, hey, somebody wants to buy this 12-unit building. I want to bring you in early in the discussion to help analyze it from a property management standpoint. And then it goes, well, hey, now it's a 30 unit. Okay, now it's a 50 unit, right? So the big last deal we did together was a 52 unit complex. And we've got that under management now. And because we've performed and we've, fed business back to him,
Uh-huh.
And when I did that syndication, that 18 units, that was an off-market deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I negotiated the price even before he was even in the picture. And so then I brought him in. I was like, hey, we just need a transaction broker, right?
Yeah.
And I negotiated that into the contract. And I brought him in, even though technically we might not have needed it. We could probably got away with it legally. But I, brought him in, and, just bringing value to both sides.
Yeah. People sometimes seem like they're so afraid to like spend that extra money, like, oh, well, why am I going to pay that agent for whatever when I'm doing all the work? Or why am I going to pay the property manager to help me do this stuff or whatever? Well, because if it costs you 5 or 10 or even 30 grand now, well, that could bring you $1 million in the next 5 years, or whatever it might be, you don't know.
Yeah.
But just as long as you make contacts with good people that are big in the industry where you're at, definitely bringing that cash to the table in the beginning is just the cost of doing business, and it'll probably come back to you in the end. So that makes a ton of sense. So what were some of the growing pains you had? I know it's like, must be hard to go from like, not that many units to however many you have now. There must have been some growing pains, like maybe hiring or finding the right people to do the job or anything like that.
Yeah. Finding, people are always going to be a growing pain. Initially I was of the philosophy that I want to be working 12 hours a day before I hire somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I did that with my first property manager hire. We were up to 150-ish, 200 units, somewhere in there when I brought her on. And she is very detail oriented, process oriented, and organized, and a great fit for where she's at. And I realized how many things I was letting fall through the cracks because I'm more of a visionary. I'm kind of the the guy that wants to be out there directing the company. So sometimes the details weren't always my strong suit operationally. And she's like, oh my gosh, like we need to, and she'd never done property management before, but she's like, and I was like, well, here's something I think we need to get caught up on. And she's like, yeah, you don't have any of this information, And so she really helped get us in line internally and work on our processes, and then realizing how valuable it was to have her on. But yeah, definitely getting that pain point where it was like, okay, I'm answering all these phone calls all day. And then it's at 10 o'clock at night, I was able to actually get around to catching up on emails and addressing stuff that needed to be addressed there. So just, getting to the point where I could justify hiring somebody, that was a big pain point for me.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess the next thing what you guys did was start a construction company, right? Atlas Construction, which was that mainly coming off of, it was probably hard to find good contractors or find them to come quickly and on time. So you're like, well, let me just start my own.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was kind of numerous things, right? So I started it before I started the property management company because I was just managing my own properties. I was starting to work with some investors, and we were starting to rehab some houses for some of them. But mainly it was like, I'm getting ripped off having to buy, use contractors, right? Or I felt like I was, and I wasn't always getting the timeliness that I needed, or, what I thought was always a fair price, being an investor, and then you solicit somebody that remodels homes and you're like, whoa, they're really expensive. Like if their thing is, redoing nice homes, you got to find an investor friendly contractor. I needed my own maintenance staff anyway. So I just started integrating that internally. I was already paying 3 guys on 1099s as it was, because we had some substantial rehab projects. So I was like, well, let's just bring them in-house and make it its own thing. And we started working with investors and servicing them, doing some rehabs, bringing it into property management, doing some flips for them, maintenance, service, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. So in Kansas, I guess you're in Missouri. So in Missouri, but do you work in both Kansas and Missouri?
Yeah, so Kansas City straddles the state line, so we manage and rehab on both sides.
Okay. So do you have to have a contractor's license there in Kansas or in Missouri, or did you hire like a project manager that had a contractor's license?
So that's a really good question. So there is certain cities require contractor's license. There's one caveat about it. Now, if we go way back to college, when I was an engineer, I got my professional engineering license. If you
Okay.
have a PE, you don't have to take the contractor test to get your license. So
Perfect.
by default, we can just go in and sign up. And I actually have a partner on Atlas Construction. Again, much better operationally than I am. So he handles all of our field operations, managing the oversight of the business. I focus more on the sales and the maintenance side, and he handles a lot of our projects, our rehabs, that sort of stuff.
Okay. Yeah. And, a lot of states that if you need a contractor's license, it doesn't have to be the owner of the company. You can hire a designated license holder or whatever it's called,
Mm-hmm.
like a foreman or a manager, like you're saying, that can
Yeah.
put the license under his name. So
Yeah.
I
And
was,
my partner's also a PE. So we went to
okay,
engineering school together. So
perfect.
we didn't, yeah, you do need your contractor's license, and we've been able to not have to go take the test and get the contractor one, contractor two. I really haven't even looked into it that much once I found out there was a workaround.
Yeah, no,
So,
that's good. I mean, some places, shoot, you don't even need like to get a contractor's license. I know my brother has a big construction company in Delaware, and like
mhm.
all you got to do to get your contractor's license is go down to the city or the county and then pay $50 and you get a contractor's license. Like there's no
Yeah.
stipulations. But here in California, gosh, it's like you got to have so many years experience and testing and like all
Mhm.
this crazy amounts of stuff to do it. So there's probably a better way in the middle of those two.
I think we're kind of in the middle. So you have to have passed this test, and then you have to have insurance, essentially. So you have to have passed this contractor test, and then or be a PE, and then
Uh-huh.
you have to have to have license and then get registered.
Yeah, no, that's probably the better way. So that's perfect. All right. Well, so you guys have bought your own properties. You started a management company, started a construction company. Um, where are you guys headed now? So let's talk a little bit real quick about what's going on now. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
coronavirus, April 30th, like I said. When this comes out, maybe we'll be all past it, or maybe we'll be deeper in it. We don't really know, but how is it affecting the local market? Is prices coming down? Is tenants not paying their rent? Like what's going on with that?
Mm-hmm. We've had 5 to 10% of tenants say they're having COVID-related issues,
Mm-hmm.
where they haven't been able to pay their rent or they're going to be late, etc. So April and May, as of this point, we're waiving late fees just to get the rents collected. Putting on payment plans on a couple tenants, not as many actually. Some people are just going to stay late. With the stimulus checks that came out, and with the unemployment and then the unemployment benefits on top of that, that extra $600 a week, we have seen our rents pick up here a little bit later in the month. Actually, just constantly our outstanding balance has just been dropping, not like a rock. Typically you want to see at the first of the month it's huge, and then within the first 5-10 days it's dropped down. It's just taken longer for us to hit that drop.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So are you still buying properties? You said you closed on one in February, but are you still actively looking for properties yourself, or?
Yeah, as the opportunities come available, honestly, we've been seeing so much growth that I've focused a lot of efforts internally on working on both of our companies, the property management and the construction side of things, just to get us operationally tight. So I don't want to have my attention divided to where one area suffers. So yes, if opportunities are available, we're still getting enough leads. We did hire a second property manager early March, and so we've been onboarding her and training her. So we've had a lot internally to focus on, and then to continue to provide good service to our customers. Some of our customers are bringing us major reposition projects. So $150,000 plus rehab on 3 different projects going on right now.
Yeah.
So big repositions, and then taking some properties that have some really, really poor tenants, and just working to reposition those. So those are management intensive in terms of getting them evicted, dealing with police issues, dealing with drug issues, etc. So those repossessions have been consuming a lot of our attention and time. So we're really focused on those right now.
Okay, right on. So, where are you guys kind of headed in the future? You going to continue to expand like more units under management, grow the construction company, or
Yeah,
what's
yeah, exactly. So
your,
the construction company, the maintenance arm of the construction company is fed by property management right now. So we're looking to expand third-party management to people that aren't under management for me directly.
Mhm.
We're continuing to look for additional projects with investors that want to reposition, whether it's single family home flips. We've got one of those starting next week, or if it's, even just doing a heavy turn between $5,000 and $15,000 on these 2-bedroom apartments when they turn. So getting in there and slamming those out in 2 weeks and then getting out. We're still doing a lot of that, just keeping us busy there. Property management, going to keep growing that. I had small goals apparently this year. I wanted my number of units under management to be 250 by the end of the year, and I exceeded that by the end of quarter 1.
Oh man, yeah.
Which was pretty awesome. So,
Think
then
it's
my second goal is 350, and I think that's going to get shot too. So, we'd love to have 400 units under management, and 400 occupied
Why
really
don't
would
we
be
get
the
some
goal.
Grant Cardone in your life and 10x that goal and try to get up there to 2,500 units this year? Huh?
I don't know that that's going to happen, but yeah, we could not be happier with the acceleration that we've seen, and I really couldn't do it without some amazing people around me to help. Because without that, I would just be so lost.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's awesome. So, all right, no, that's a good plan. I mean, you guys are obviously doing it, so I'm sure you'll exceed all those goals. So what is the best? So we'll kind of move to our next couple questions
Mhm.
here. What's the best way you like to learn about new real estate options? We've talked about networking, but there's
Mhm.
mentorships, podcasts, books, all that type of stuff. What do you like?
It's been ever flowing with me.
Yeah.
It started off with books, whether it was Audible or actually reading them. Right, got started with that, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and just kind of took off from there. And then I went pretty heavy into podcasts for a while. And networking's been a huge source recently as well. I'd say that I've kind of migrated some back towards books right now, if I had to say. But just networking with people that are smarter than me
Yeah.
and getting a chance to talk with them. Again, trying to bring value to them. I had a great phone call with a property manager out of California, and he was willing to give me an hour of his time as we've gone through this growth stage. And I was just asking him questions like, "How are you guys doing this?" And he just started outpouring advice, which I was incredibly thankful for. And that helped me focus internally. Okay, how can I grow the property management company as well? So, I can't say that I have a favorite medium. I kind of, if I'm going to be doing anything audio wise, it goes back and forth between podcasts or audiobooks. Just kind of depends on what I'm feeling like.
Okay, cool. So earlier you mentioned that when you're managing your own properties, you uh, had got some property management software.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is maybe a favorite piece of software that you use now, or that before you had all your businesses and stuff when you're kind of a sole operator that really helped you in your business?
Yeah. So Buildium's our property management software. We couldn't do it without it. I mean, everything gets done through there.
Yeah.
Both our property managers and myself are in it pretty heavily. A lot
Okay.
of detailed reports that we can get out. But I wanted to be mobile when I started this company.
Mhm.
So even when I started first real estate investing, I wanted to be mobile. I didn't want to be tied to a computer. I want to be able to go on an iPhone or an iPad or whatever
Yeah.
and go. So Building was important because it's web-based. I know a lot of them are right now. Everything's gone web-based. And the other part was the whole Google Suite, G Suite. We're all Gmail and Google Drive based. So I can be on the phone driving or in my truck, and somebody says, "Hey, I need your EIN to turn utilities on this unit," and I can bring out my phone, bring out my Google Drive, and pull up the EIN for one of the various companies and get it flipped
Yeah.
on that way. So yeah, I couldn't do it without Google Drive's huge.
Yeah. I just was talking to somebody about that the other day, maybe on a podcast, and it's like, okay, I have an iPhone and I like iPhones,
Mm-hmm.
but everything I do is into the G Suite, and all the Google stuff. I'm like, so why am I not on Android? But I still like the iPhone better, but everything, like I use the Gmail app. I use all the
Mm-hmm.
Google Drive, everything on my iPhone. It's just so much better. It's just easy.
Yeah, yeah. And when we were, putting together pro formas pretty heavily when we were, analyzing properties, I would get on Google Drive. We'd do all the analysis in Google Sheets. Right, I've got a pretty robust Google Sheet / Excel built out there for doing analysis. Then we would print the final page or 2 pages that need to be shown to the investors. we'd go into Google Slides and build a little deck, a small 5-page deck, throw in some pictures, throw in some numbers, render those as PDFs, email them out, and then share the Google Drive folder that had pictures in it, as well as copies of the PDFs. Just get a shareable link and send it out. And
Perfect. Yeah.
yeah, we
Works
were
so
doing
good.
that a ton, and it's just so easy to do that.
Right on. Well, cool. Colin, this has been a great conversation. You had lots of stuff going on. I hope if anybody is looking in the Kansas City area, reach out to Colin. I'm sure he has tons of great connections. Obviously, his network is great. So, Colin, where can people find out more about you and your companies and what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. If they're interested in the company, go to www.atlas.rentals, and that's for the property management company. Look me up on LinkedIn, Colin Douthit, or you can email me if you have a direct question, colin@atlas.rentals.
Okay, cool. And yeah, all this will be in the show notes, everybody. So you guys visit the show notes page and have all Colin's contact information and everything. So, Colin, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
Yes, sir.
See ya.